Hi, and welcome to the Work in Progress podcast series. I'm your host, Helen Gilbert, Talent and Development Business Partner at Euromonitor. And this episode is an LGBTQ plus crossover tying in with Pride Month. Our guests will share their career journey along with how they navigate challenges and stay true to their authentic selves. So let me say a big hello to Matt. And if you could give us a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Matt Carty. I work out of Euromonitor's Chicago office. I am the Senior Global Director for Product Commercialization. What that means is that I am the product owner for both Passport and Euromonitor.com, the company's website. And I work with stakeholders from all across the business, so sales, marketing, research, technology, to optimize both platforms for our external customer success.
Perfect. Okay, so the first question then is, can you share how your career started and a moment you had to really back yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So I landed at Euromonitor about 5 years post-university, and it was an individual contributor sales role. From there, I ended up leading the trade, government, and academics team locally here in Chicago. In 2014, I took on a role as global director of our academics division, which is a role that ultimately took me to London. And that was supposed to be a 1-year commitment, but no one asked me to leave, so I ended up staying for almost 5 years. Towards the end of my visa term, there was an opportunity to move to Cape Town and then take on the role of a country manager of the Cape Town office, overseeing our sub-Saharan African operations. And so when the opportunity presented itself, it was a no-brainer for me. And again, that was supposed to be a 2-year commitment, but ended up being 4 years. And in that interim, I moved out of my global director for academic sales role and took on a role overseeing globally our marketing and communications division, which is a role I did for about 2 years. And then coinciding with my departure from Cape Town, my move back to Chicago, I also left that role and moved into the product space. And originally that was looking after more go-to-market for our new products, so e-commerce, innovation, et cetera. And then it naturally progressed into the product ownership role over the website and Passport, which I'm in today. So it's been a very non-linear journey at Euromonitor, and it's presented a lot of really great opportunities, again, to work across different divisions, to work across different countries. So huge amounts of opportunity for professional growth and personal growth, both. The moments where I've had to back myself, I would say from a professional perspective, taking on this role as the product owner for Passport. I do not come from a traditional product background based on all the things that I just said. And I also don't come from a very technical background as well. So it was really being thrown in kind of the deep end of figuring out both lanes and doing it really quickly, because Passport being our flagship client offering, we need to make sure that things are moving along and that we get it right. Where I really had to learn to kind of trust my perspective, speak up for what I thought was right in rooms that I hadn't necessarily been in previously, and really work to make myself visible without kind of waiting for permission around that. I'm just going to add to that. I know the question was probably more about work, but from a personal perspective, I think times that I've had to back myself are both my moves to London and Cape Town. And anyone coming from abroad who has ever tried to open a bank account in the UK or find a flat sight unseen in South Africa will probably share some of my frustrations as someone moving from abroad and really having to build a life from scratch. Both of those presented very unique challenges and were huge opportunities for personal growth.
That's amazing. It's not even like you've come over for a short time. Even if in London or Cape Town, you were there for a couple of years, if not longer.
Almost 4.5 years in London and 4 years in Cape Town. Yes. I mean, you've really got to kind of dig in and root yourself and make friends and find your local grocery store and do all the things that you would do if you'd always been living in that country. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, then. So with your personal experience just there, have your personal experiences shaped how you show up at work or as a leader?
I mean, definitely. I think everyone's personal experiences show up and exhibit themselves in terms of how they show up at work, how they show up in all aspects of their lives, I would say. I think my personal experiences show up in my leadership style. I think we all have the realization that not everyone shows up or experiences the workplace in the same way. People start oftentimes with different levels of comfort, different levels of confidence, and that's really largely going to be formed by their earlier experiences in life and other office place experiences. So how this shows up in my leadership and my interaction with colleagues, I always try and create space for different people's perspectives, especially for folks who may not naturally feel heard in any given room. I always try and focus on small signals of inclusion. It's not just big gestures, but looking across a room and seeing who's being invited in, who's being recognized, whose ideas get traction, and really trying to work to make sure that everyone feels included and that their voices are heard. I think that in leadership, a really important thing is not just listening to what's being said in a room, but also listening to what's not being said, and whose voices aren't being heard.
I think that's brilliant, because you can be an introverted person and you don't want to interrupt anyone, and you don't feel that you want to speak up in that moment, but actually you're making space for them or anyone else in that room to have a chance to speak as well, and being aware of them.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think this is something that might surprise people about, but I am naturally an introvert. And I look at this through the lens of where our batteries are charged. Not necessarily who's best at engaging with other people socially, but I think it's where do we kind of recover. And for me, being a natural introvert, it's not in these social situations. It's not in big meetings. I'm naturally a lot more quiet and reflective. And I think that's something that may surprise people. And I think because of that, and because of having brought myself into various rooms from school age, various workplace situations as an introvert, you really have to kind of learn how to navigate in a leadership position. And I think that then, when you get to a position where you're running some of these rooms, having that perspective naturally makes you more focused on ensuring that everyone around you feels included. And especially folks who come in a little bit more quiet and reflective, you naturally want to make sure that they feel included as well.
So my next question then is, what values guide how you lead others, especially when things are difficult or unclear?
I think that there are a handful of values that come to mind. First and foremost for me is always transparency. And I think that's whether that's reporting up to leadership, reporting down to folks working on a project. I think rather reporting laterally across other folks that you're working with on a project. I think that transparency is of utmost importance. I don't think that we gain anything by not being transparent with one another. And I think that transparency, of course, helps to breed trust and efficiency. Empathy is another one. And I think, again, we all experience this differently. We all are empathetic in different ways. I think we bring our own experiences to the table when it relates to empathy. But I think that I really do try and see everyone's perspectives. And that's important, particularly, if you are in tense situations and you are trying to solve problems and everyone has different opinions. Being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes really helps to drive forward solving the problem at hand. The last one I would say is clarity over perfection. I don't think that in order to move forward or evolve that we necessarily need all of the answers right away. And we don't necessarily need the perfect solution. I think it's okay to come up with something and iterate or change course if we realize that we've gone the wrong direction. But I think that clarity over perfection is something that I always strive for.
That's like the working agile method, isn't it? Do you know what? We'll get it 80% of the way there. We continue reiterating it as and when things change or we notice errors.
That's exactly it. Looking at my role in product, and as I've had to integrate myself more into the technology space, that's the ethos that we live and breathe by in tech, is the agile framework. And so, yes, definitely. And it applies outside of technology. And I think it applies to anywhere in life, really. We should all apply an agile framework.
Oh, I love that. Making agile deeper. So then my next question then is, what's one small habit or reset that helps you lead better under pressure? Like tight timeframes, high performance?
I'm going to say this, and I'm not perfect at it, and it's a tough one. And I think it's something that we all could do, is pause before reacting. And I think that it's so easy, especially in tense situations, to really just drive forward and just have an immediate reaction. And I think that oftentimes, and maybe this is more the introvert in me, being able to pause, reflect on a concept or an idea or a question before having that immediate response or reaction, I think is going to be 10x more powerful in terms of what that response is going to look like. So it's simple, but it's not easy to put into practice. So I do always try and kind of take a moment to step back, reframe, and respond more intentionally and less emotionally. Ultimately, the impact is that leads to better decisions and hopefully creates a safer space for other folks to speak up as well.
Like that, you've taken a moment and then you're back and thinking more, not rationally, but you're seeing the bigger picture kind of thing.
That's it. Exactly.
Perfect then. So what's the biggest skill you're building right now?
I think that it is learning through complexity. And I think, especially, hopefully everyone's aware of the Passport Reimagine project that we're working on right now, which is, really the biggest thing that we have done at this company in the near 20 years that I've been here. And I would say in the decade previous to that, even. And I think because it's not just about the platform, it's about how we're reimagining content. It's about how we're reimagining how our data is distributed to our customers. This is just such a huge, all-encompassing thing that involves I mean, everyone in the business is basically a stakeholder in this, either in terms of ideation, development, or the recipient of the final product. This is just a huge transformation. There are so many layers of complexity around each area of delivery. And there's so much learning for everyone. And there's a lot of learning on my end personally. I've been more in the product space for the last few years, but something of this magnitude requires a huge amount of learning, not just about the technical aspects of what it is that we're delivering, but how to manage this high volume of stakeholders and how to manage go to market for something as huge as this and nail it and get it right. And it comes with a lot of complexity. It comes with a lot of pressure. So I think, more of what I mean around this kind of in practice is trying to simplify things for others. And I see this as being a core part of my role and also a really strong skill set that I have is taking complex problems and simplifying them for a number of wider audiences, being clear on the things that matter, the things that don't, and probably most importantly, how all of the dots connect. And again, that's hugely important in a complex project like this. It's naturally something that I've learned about myself in my near 20 years of Euromonitor is it's something that I'm good at. It's something that I can bring to the table. So, why this matters in the end is this level of clarity. It helps people feel more confident. It helps the leadership team feel more confident in us that we know what we're doing, what we're talking about. And, for a big change like this, it's something that's absolutely necessary.
And then how you've described your learning as well is like the epitome of the 70-20-10 kind of learning style where it's 70% on the job, 20% social, and like the 10% classroom. But we'll put that to the side, the formal training. But that learning complexity, that's on the job learning. And then you're sharing what you've learned with others.
100%. And I think that there's no amount of that more formal learning that can prepare you for something like this, a situation of this magnitude. So a lot of it is, learning on the job and just kind of trusting your gut instinct, which can be hard to do. But I think it's important for all of us to be able to feel like we can do that and have the confidence that what we're bringing to the table is powerful.
So what's the most impactful advice a mentor, if you've ever had one, hopefully you have, has ever given you, and how do you pass it on?
This is going to harken back to one of the earlier questions. And this is, I don't know if I would categorize this necessarily as the best piece of advice that I've heard, but it's something that just has stuck with me more than any other piece of advice. And it actually comes from a colleague and friend, Rose, and the marketing team in London. And Rose said to me at one moment when I was living over there, probably 2015 or 2016, who knows what it was that we were working on, but she said, let's not let perfection get in the way of good. And it's just an ethos that, I really try and live by. As somewhat of a perfectionist, it's difficult for me sometimes to let go of that control and really follow that kind of agile framework and really just kind of iterate towards a good decision. It's just important to not be so hung up on having the perfect solution or the perfect product or the perfect whatever that we're not moving towards that, and that level of perfection is inhibiting our progress. So yeah, I mean, I try and live by that and how I pass it on. I try, again, to just keep encouraging teams and folks that I'm working with to move forward and not wait for that perfect answer to come.
That's it. That's totally correct. You could be sitting there for a long time before the perfect answer is even there. And that perfect answer will only be perfect for 5 minutes. And then as the world changes, the needs and demands change. So it's like, go with what you kind of know and then work on it from there.
Especially in the world that we're living in now. I mean, change is the constant. And if we waited around for perfection, you're absolutely right. I mean, 5 minutes from now, that perfect solution probably wouldn't be perfect anymore. So I think we just need to keep it moving.
Definitely, 100%. This is a long question, just to forewarn you. What's one leadership behavior or organizational practice that genuinely increased your sense of psychological safety or belonging? And what changed as a result?
That is a long question. My answer might not be as long. I think that leaders, and I'm including myself in this, being open about what we don't know, And this goes back to some of what we were talking about earlier around empathy. I think if we, as leaders, as colleagues, are confident enough to be open about what we don't know, I think that can be kind of scary but humbling experience. I think it makes us more relatable and more real, and I think it also empowers the teams around us to come forward with their own ideas and be their own expert in whatever the topic at hand is. Because oftentimes we feel in leadership positions like we need to be the expert in everything, or we need to have knowledge about everything. But the reality is we can't and we don't. And I think that's, a really important tool in our toolbox is to empower the people around us to be the experts and then not necessarily us being the experts in everything. Ultimately, that leads to more honest, open conversations. And again, it empowers teams to contribute earlier and more often.
I totally agree. I think showing that vulnerability, it shows that you're a human. That leader is a human. They're a person, that first and foremost. They're not AI. They don't know all the answers. They might hallucinate, who knows? But they're human. And the fact that you can say, look, I don't know the answer to this, but also you're part of my team. If you know the answer or you want to share an idea of what you think could solve this problem or could be done better, then the table is open to share your idea.
That's it.
That's good. Okay, then. What's one thing leaders can often underestimate about how decisions or policies land across different regions, identities, or lived experiences?
I think that something that leaders, including myself, can often underestimate is how much lived experiences shape interpretation and shape how we show up in the workplace. We haven't talked too much about the main topic at hand, which is the LGBTQ plus ERG. I think that the lived experience for people who are a part of any of those communities is oftentimes very different at a foundational level from other colleagues who might be in the workplace. That it's difficult. It requires a very high level of empathy to kind of grasp that different lived experience and understand why someone might be showing up differently in the workplace. I look at my own journey at Euromonitor and in earlier positions at other companies, and I think that there have been times where I have lacked in confidence or not felt empowered in certain rooms that I've shown up in. And I think a lot of that is internal, and it is because of my own lived experience. And I think that it's easy in a leadership position to not realize how much of an impact that might have on how someone shows up.
Yes, and you're saying, I want people to engage, I want people to comment, but people don't necessarily want to share those things because of their own experiences.
That's it. And I think, without direct evidence or knowledge of what people have been through outside of the workplace, it's really difficult to fully understand why they might be showing up in a certain way.
Yeah, and it's giving them that leeway. If there's that little bit of leeway to give to people because you don't know what their own experience have been, what they're going through right now.
That's it. Exactly. A little bit of grace.
That's it. Oh, that's better worded. So thinking about psychological safety and inclusion, what's one practical thing people can do at any level to create more transparency, trust, and open dialogue, especially, as we've said before, about people that don't necessarily feel comfortable to do so?
Making space and holding it. And I think it's going back to the previous question on lived experiences, but and many other aspects too. It's creating room for however people are showing up and making sure to actively solicit their ideas and contributions. What does this look like in practice? Actively invite input, particularly from maybe the introverts in the room. Notice who hasn't spoken, avoid more dominant voices kind of taking over the conversation. I think that a critical part to all of this is showing that people's individual contributions and input matter, acknowledging it, thanking them for it, building on it, acting on it. And I think that's ultimately what builds trust over time.
Definitely. I think when people interrupt other people, most of the time I think it's out of passion. They're just passionate and they want to get their point across. But if you're someone that struggles to speak up and you've just then been interrupted, you're like, well, I'm not going to speak up now because I'm just going to get interrupted. So it's noticing that happening. And as a person, not interrupting someone, but actually, if you're someone in the room, going back to that person and be like, so let's go back to your point. What were you saying about this? Just to make sure like you were heard.
100%.
Perfect, though. So I've just got one more question. So how do you recharge your sense of purpose when it wavers?
How do I recharge my sense of purpose? I would say taking a step back and reconnecting to just the bigger impact of the work, the people around me, how everyone's contributions roll up to the wider vision. I think a helpful reset for me is always grounding myself in engaging with different parts of the business, common theme of this whole conversation is just hearing different people's perspectives as well, I think can be a very grounding experience. An outcome of all of this is just kind of recentering beyond that day-to-day pressure, because it's really easy to get caught up in kind of the freneticness of everything that's going on. So some of these more grounding conversations, I just think, help root us back into the wider vision and mission.
Because you have so many like diverse areas to your role and you cross so many different divisions, that you get to see the bigger picture on larger scales as well.
It is, and it's tough, but you've really got to be able to maintain focus on, as they say, the forest beyond the trees.
Brilliant. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of the episode. Massive thanks to Matt for joining us today and being so honest and giving us insight into his world. And for everyone else, keep an eye out for the next episode. Thanks. Bye.